The worst trades in the NBA ever made. The goal of a trade is to put each team in a better situation. Sometimes, trades can look like a fair deal at the moment. However, later they end up looking like one team got robbed. Others are lopsided as a result of teams attempting to tank or get rid of players on large contracts. The trades we will be covering today are trades that even at the moment looked ridiculous, and looking back with hindsight, look even worse. We will be looking at the worst NBA trades ever made. Mo Williams to the Los Angeles Clippers for an unprotected pick. The first trade we will be looking at was between the Los Angeles Clippers and the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Cavs were in shambles in the 2010-2011 season after losing the savior of their team, LeBron James, in free agency to the Miami Heat. As a result of this, it was clear that they would have no shot of competing for the championship or even making the finals without the King. The trade sent Baron Davis and an unprotected first-round pick to the Cavaliers in exchange for Mo Williams and Jamario Moon. The key part of this trade, and what would go on to make the Clippers look like fools in this deal, was the fact that they did not put any protection on this first-round pick. As a result of this, the Cavs would go on to win the NBA lottery with the Clippers pick, and had the number 1 selection in the 2011 NBA draft. With that pick, they selected Kyrie Irving, who would go on to lead the franchise until LeBron returned to Cleveland. Even with LeBron back on the team, Irving was the clear second option, and hit one of the most clutch shots in finals history to seal the game, and bring Cleveland its first championship in team history in 2016. In comparison, Mo Williams only played a season and a half with the Clippers, where he only started in 23 of his 74 games. With the Clippers, he averaged 13.8 points, 3.8 assists, 2.1 rebounds, and 1 steal a game. It is possible that even with this awful trade that set the franchise back years, you could still say that it worked out for Los Angeles. If Kyrie were on the team, it is likely there would have been no Lob City era with the team. And going further, it is also unlikely that Kawhi Leonard and Paul George would be on the team today. Oklahoma City Thunder trade James Harden to the Houston Rockets. The next trade we will cover is the trade between the Houston Rockets and the Oklahoma City Thunder that sent Kevin Martin, Jeremy Lamb, 2 first-round picks, and 1 second-round pick to the Thunder in exchange for James Harden. This trade came about because Russell Westbrook, Serge Ibaka, and James Harden were all due for contract extensions in the following season, and there was no way that all their new contracts would be able to fit into the cap space. As a result of this, the Thunder decided to part ways with Harden, who was the 6th man of the year on the Thunder, rather than parting ways with Ibaka. If this trade would have never happened, the Thunder could still possibly have a core of Russell Westbrook, James Harden, and Kevin Durant, and would have had them through all of their primes. It is unknown whether Harden would have progressed into the player that he is today if he was limited to a mostly bench role if he stayed on the Thunder. However, if he would have turned into the Harden that we know today, it is possible that Thunder would have dominated the second half of the 2010s, and could even still be on top of the league today. Westbrook, Harden, and Durant have all gone on to win MVP awards, and having that much talent and offensive firepower on one team together once they had all reached their peaks would have been terrifying for the rest of the league to try to stop. With the Rockets, Harden has blossomed into a one-time MVP winner and perennial MVP candidate. He has averaged 29.6 points, 6 rebounds, 7.7 assists, and 1.8 steals a game with the Rockets. While this was a trade that the Thunder had to do to keep their core together, if they knew what Harden would become, it would be likely that they would trade Ibaka instead and keep the 3 young stars together as long as they could. The San Antonio Spurs trade Dennis Rodman to the Chicago Bulls. The next trade that we will cover was also another trade of necessity. It sent Dennis Rodman to the Chicago Bulls in return for Will Perdue. In the eyes of the San Antonio Spurs, Rodman had to be traded. He did not fit the Spurs way in any sense of the definition. He was a part of multiple spats with higher-ups with the Spurs, and with him causing issues like this, they had to trade him. However, what they got in return was nothing compared to what they gave up. If they were still able to come to terms with Rodman or find someone on the team that could, and they were still able to get the first pick to get Tim Duncan in the draft, the Spurs would have been even more dominant than they already were during their run with Timmy D. Rodman went on to play a crucial role on the Bulls, and was an integral piece of them going on to a second three-peat. Along with this, even when he was on the Spurs, Rodman was showing clear signs of being one of the best rebounders that the NBA had ever seen, and had seen up to this date. The Cincinnati Royals trade Oscar Robertson to the Milwaukee Bucks. The following trade takes us all the way back to 1970, where the Cincinnati Royals traded Oscar Robertson to the Milwaukee Bucks in exchange for Flynn Robinson and Charlie Paulk. This trade was a shock at the time, as Robertson spent his collegiate career playing for the University of Cincinnati Bearcats, and had spent 10 seasons playing with the Royals. With him spending the majority of his life and likely becoming one of the most beloved athletes in Cincinnati at the time, it makes this move by the Royals very shocking. With the team, Robertson had averaged 29.3 points, 8.5 rebounds, and 10.3 assists a game. In his final season with the Royals before trading him, he averaged 25.3 points, 6.1 rebounds, and 8.1 assists a game. However, at the time, this was a blockbuster move, as it teamed Oscar up with the legendary big man Kareem Abdul-Jabbar on the Bucks. This star pairing led the Bucks, bringing home the only championship in their franchise's history. The Royals later left Cincinnati and are currently the Sacramento Kings. The Charlotte Hornets trade Kobe Bryant to the Los Angeles Lakers. The next deal comes from a draft night trade that sent Kobe Bryant to the Lakers, and in return, they got Vlade Divac. This was a big summer for the Lakers, as they acquired Kobe through the trade and signed Shaq just a few weeks later. This would set up their core for an eventual three-peat of NBA championships. Kobe knew that something was up when the Hornets selected him in the draft. In an interview, he was quoted as saying, "Charlotte never wanted me. Hornets coach Dave Cowens told me he didn't want me. It wasn't a question of me ever playing in Charlotte. They had a couple of guards already, a couple small forwards. So it wasn't like I would be off the bench much." He went on to say, "I knew who Dave Cowens was and was pretty excited to play for him. Then I was like, oh, alright." I quickly transitioned from being a smiley kid to killer instinct. Kobe could not be closer to the truth. Since he entered the league, he had that killer instinct, and it lifted him to being one of the NBA greats. With the Lakers, he played for 20 seasons and averaged 25 points, 5.2 rebounds, 4.7 assists, and 1.4 steals a game. On top of this, he brought home 5 championships to Los Angeles, was third on the all-time scorers list at the time of his retirement, and is considered by many to be the greatest Laker of all time. The Seattle Supersonics trade Scottie Pippen to the Chicago Bulls. The next entry on the list comes from another draft day trade. The trade between the Chicago Bulls and the Seattle Supersonics sent number 5 pick Scottie Pippen and a 1988 or 1989 pick swap, which turned into Jeff Sanders. In return, the Bulls sent draft rights to number 8 pick Olden Polynice, a 1988 second-round pick which turned into Sylvester Gray, the option to exchange 1988 or 1989 first-round picks, and a top 3 protected pick, which turned into BJ Armstrong. The Supersonics lost this trade by a long shot. Scottie Pippen would turn into arguably the best two-way player of all time, along with one of the best second options in NBA history. He showed he could even lead a team by himself when Michael Jordan retired for a season to try out baseball. And the Bulls' record only slipped a single game with the absence of Jordan. In that season, Scottie finished very high in MVP voting, and many believe that he should have won the award. Pippen would play 12 seasons with the Chicago Bulls, in which he would average 17.7 points, 6.7 rebounds, 5.3 assists, 2.1 steals, and 0.9 blocks a game. He was also part of the Bulls' run of 6 rings in 7 years. He led the league in steals in the 1994-1995 season and was a Hall of Fame player. The rest of the players in the trade combined did not have anywhere near the career that Pippen did. It is very surprising to see that both Jordan's second and third options on the team that he is most remembered for both came from trades. The Brooklyn Nets-Boston Celtics trade. The final trade that we will be covering today arguably takes the cake as being the worst trade of all time. It set this franchise back years and years, and it seems they might be finally making a resurgence after 7 years post-trade. This is the trade between the Brooklyn Nets and the Boston Celtics. The Nets had already made moves that put Deron Williams onto the roster, and it looked like this could be the blockbuster trade that put them over the top of teams in the East. After this trade, people thought they would even have a chance against the Miami Heat. At the time, people saw the Nets giving up way too much in a desperate attempt to obtain relevance. However, the plan fell flat on its face. In the deal, the Celtics gave up Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, and Jason Terry. In return, the Nets gave up Gerald Wallace, Chris Humphries, Marshawn Brooks, Keith Bogans, Chris Joseph, and 3 unprotected first-round picks. These 3 first-round picks are what would go on to make this such a bad trade for the Nets. Their ultimate goal of running the East was shut down by LeBron James, who beat the Nets in a short 5-game series. The stars of the Nets were simply too old to compete with some of the best players in the East being in their athletic primes. The picks that the Nets gave up would turn out to be Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and Colin Sexton. If the Nets were to have held on to these picks, they could be a franchise that was absolutely loaded with young talent and one of the most promising teams for the future. However, things worked out for the Nets, as they currently have 2 stars in Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant currently on their roster, and the NBA title in their sights for the 2020-2021 season. Final thoughts. In conclusion, an awful trade can come at any time in the NBA season and offseason. Some teams did not do enough homework on the players in the draft, and ended up trading a star for players that would not be on their roster in a short amount of time. Others overvalue current players and give up picks that end up being future stars, while other teams have issues with a player on their roster that goes on to thrive in a different situation. Thank you for watching another UpNext Sports video. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment down below with some other awful trades that we missed out on, and join us next time for more basketball content similar to this.